I think that chapter is really interesting because it does a lot of like atmosphere setting, because this is like, other than like, you know, the weird wolf dog kitty, this is, and talking birds, there was actual like death allegories, and how this maybe they're in limbo, maybe they're dead. We don't really know what's going on. And this is also one of the first times I think the wind is really important as a symbol in this miniseries.
I agree, and I think the narrative connection of that symbolism gets stronger throughout the story.
Literally.
Yes. But yeah, I agree with the overall theming of the death here, especially like the significance of something seeming to be dead but then coming back alive or reanimating. I really like how the show drops a lot of like little crumbs here and there, or like little bits of foreshadowing throughout the story. Yeah.
And like throughout this, we're also seeing like these weird black turtles that are kind of walking around. And I did Google. I was like, okay, what's the deal with these? And Patrick McHale described them as an imperfection in the quilt, both metaphorically and literally. They're like intentionally a mystery.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
That maybe people like create meaning for. Maybe it's an allegory to inner darkness. They're seen like, yeah, who knows?
Cool. I like that. I like adding a little bit of mystery into your story. It's so cutesy and very like intentionally cartoony. And the interesting thing I think that they do with the animation style is all of the characters are done in a way, the closest thing I can think to compare it to is like Steven Universe. How the animation style is technically consistent among almost all settings and characters, but each character is still uniquely drawn and animated in a way that makes them sort of unique or brings out particular characteristics of them. And this show is very similar. So like when we come to the schoolhouse, the animal students and the teacher, Mrs. Langtree, are
She's down
animated
bad.
Are technically the same animation style as like Wirt and Greg, but they're still drawn very distinctively and in a much more cutesy manner and brighter colors than Wirt and Greg, who are much more dour and like they're not in terms of personality so much, but in their art style and in their clothing and the colors that they show.
Yeah, they're much more of the world.
Yes. Yeah, and this is much more like goofy, fantastical a little bit.
Yeah, it's very much, and I think some inspiration from the art comes, you know those like vintage postcards that are super creepy, and it'll be like bugs having tea and dancing around it. That's like the vibe of Over the Garden Wall, which I really like.
And I really fuck with it. I love it.
I do a lot.
And we get into Miss Langtree's Lament,
which I actually do know the song on the ukulele.
I love that. This is one of my favorite.
You want to hear some, actually?
Songs. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Always. Maybe if I play a little bit, we can just keep it in.
Yeah.
We'll find out if this is tuned. So it's like... Yeah, it's not in tune, but that's what I got.
That was so good. Good job.
Every time they say the wild gorilla's on the loose, it makes me so giddy.
It's so funny. It's so funny. I love how they managed to make it a running joke in the span of like 5 minutes. Like, they're very That's another thing I really like about this series is that they're very efficient with their storytelling, which they have to be because each episode is like 10 to 11 minutes.
Yeah.
So they have to be, but they do it so well that, like, yes, things are kind of moving quickly, but it still balances well, and the story still, like, moves along at an appropriate pace, if that makes sense.
Can we talk about how the like character design of these trees?
Oh yeah,
How twisted and flesh looking they are.
Yes.
Also, I think it's interesting because when they're like chopped down, it looks like they're hollow on the inside.
Yes, which makes sense towards the end when you see the one that's growing around Greg. But yeah, no, they're really interesting. The way their branches and roots are distributed intentionally almost make them look like limbs. And the like knolls in their bark are like vaguely in the shape of faces. Like not so much what you would associate with a human face per se, but more like an intentionally spooky face drawn on something. It just like, yeah, the design of them is so cool. Yeah. I love them.
And this is how you know these people know what they're doing. Because here's the dialogue. I don't have the embouchure for the bassoon. Sure, the middle and lower rangers have some similarities in terms of cuts out. And I know exactly what he was going to say.
What was it?
It's going to be fingerings.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because the C on a clarinet like this, that's a C on bassoon. Like this section, the same.
That's fun.
Different key though, and those types of things are a difference. But as someone who, when switching from concert to marching band, like back-to-back songs, had to switch between the clarinet and the bassoon, I felt the changes in embouchure. You know, I don't know if you agree with me, Raven, but representation is important.
Indeed it is.
And here I really felt seen. As
a band member, I feel that.
As a clarinet switch bassoonist. There's not a lot of media for people like me. And it's just like, it's just important.
It is honestly uncanny how well suited this show seems for you specifically.
Yeah, it's weird. Like sometimes I watch it, I'm just like, I don't know about this. I don't know who's been watching me.
But no, one of the things I do really like, because in this particular case, the people that are involved with this project are also very musical themselves.
Yeah.
And clearly have the requisite knowledge to be able to like make a little joke, make a little aside like this. But in general, like, I do really appreciate whenever someone who's working on a fictional project, about something that they're not an expert in, like a writer or a director or something like that, when they really do take the time to even just like ask a couple basic questions or do like a little bit of research to make sure that they're at least saying things that make sense. Because then like, if you are someone who, for example, plays the clarinet and the bassoon, and you can understand this joke, and it makes it that much more enjoyable for you.
It's perfect.
I love that.
It was perfect.
We see that Greg is talking to the beast, and he says, well, you've brought me this teacup, and you've brought me this like golden cone or whatever. But what you still haven't brought me is, I forget what he
wants the sun.
He wants the sun in the cup. And so we see that Greg sets up his teacup on this tree stump, and, he just has to wait until the sun sets and falls into the cup. So, like, clearly at sunset, Greg shall perish from this world.
Yeah, the idea, what I thought it was to give Greg, like, impossible tasks so he'd lose hope. But that's not working. Yeah. And so then finally it was, I just need to kill him by making him wait in the cold and the snow.
Yeah.
Because he's never giving up hope.
He's never giving up hope, yeah. Little baby Greg.
He looks sick, so yeah, with that forced perspective.
Yeah, he looks much more haggard here. We see like dark circles under his eyes. He's colored a lot more pale than he has been earlier in the series, so we can tell like definitely the cold is taking its toll.
So, what kind of discussion do we have, Raven?
Okay, so I have three options that we could talk about.
Damn.
The first one is like the impacting of foreshadowing and narrative styling on not just the story itself, but like the way you experience the story, and how like all of the things kind of compound on each other by the time you get to the end. Do we think that like each stop, so like everywhere they go, like the Dark Lantern, Pottsfield, etc., has specific symbolism, and if so, what do we think each one is?
Ooh.
And then the third one, general discussion over like how the music sort of softens the narrative's blow, right? Like this is ultimately a story of two children drowning in a river. But the way the music kind of carries you along this journey, like kind of talking about how that is interwoven with the story to both make it more palatable, but also to like emotionally acclimate you, let's say, to the setting and the tone of this narrative.
I think it could be fun doing locations and like maybe
Okay.
what symbolism.
That's fun. Okay.
So
So-
I have something that could be it. Because if you think about the name Beatrice, what are some other literary examples of that?
The name Beatrice?
Yeah, that person is the guide to Dante in Dante's Inferno.
Did not know that. I've never.
Or was it Dante's lover? The Roman poet Virgil guides him through hell and purgatory. Beatrice, Dante's ideal woman, guides him through heaven.
That's very interesting.
So I think there could be some interesting... Dante's Inferno, there's 9 circles of hell. Circle 1 is limbo.
Okay. That makes sense. That's them entering the woods.
Circle 2, lust. What is the second episode?
Hard times at the Huskin Bee. So that's when they go to Pottsfield.
Dante and Virgil leave limbo and enter the second circle, the first of the circles of incontinence, where the punishments of hell proper begin. They find their way hindered by the serpentine Minos, who judges all those who condemned for active, deliberately willed sin to one of the lower circles. Every soul is required to confess all their sins to Minos, and after which Minos sentences each soul to its torment.
That's very interesting. That's when they were getting charged and sentenced to manual labor.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily lust, but interesting. I think that could fit. Third circle, gluttony.
Gluttony, interesting. So that's
Potatoes and
Smoketown
molasses.
Follies and potatoes and molasses.
I think that fits.
That's fun.
Fourth circle, greed.
Greed. That's Songs of the Dark Lantern. Greed.
They're guarded by a figure Dante names as Pluto. This is Plutus, the deity of wealth in classical mythology. Although the two are often conflated, he's a distinct figure from Pluto, the ruler of underworld.
What did you say the name of this one was? Like the sin?
Greed.
Greed.
I think that makes more sense for the following episode.
Mad Love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fifth,
I think it
the
does
fifth
too.
circle is wrath.
Wrath. Interesting. The next one after that would be Lullaby in Frogland.
Heresy. I think that fits.
I feel like that fits more with Ringing of the Bell, although I could also see that being something else. What comes after that?
Seventh circle is violence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense with
Lorna.
that makes sense with Ringing of the Bell, yeah.
And then the eighth circle, what's the episode after that? Oh, is fraud.
Babes in the Wood, Cloud City. Interesting.
And then I think the ninth episode, the ninth circle is treachery.
Into the Unknown.
I think that fits. And then
That's very
episode 10 is heaven.
And the Unknown. That's really cool. I like that, and I think that makes sense because I like the progression of your interactions with death. Like, so in the very first episode, we're warned about the beast, which I think is a very like entry level of like level setting, like, hey, if you stay here too long, you will die. The beast will get you. Be careful. It's dangerous out here. And then we go to Pottsfield, where we see basically specters of death, right? Like we find out that these are skeletons. So again, clearly these are people that have been here long enough that they just are living dead at this point. And I think it's a very, again, like clear message of, hey, bad things happen if you stay here too long, or at least things that you consider to be bad.
Yeah.
Happen if you stay here too long. And then I think Schooltown Follies is like the world kind of sucking you in more. Like, oh, hey, it's not all bad. Like, it's not, like, sometimes it's kind of fun. Maybe you do want to stay here a little bit longer. But then there's still that fear of death when we confront the gorilla, or when we consider the gorilla, but that fear appears to be thwarted when we find out, like, oh, the gorilla's just some silly guy in a suit. That's not anything to actually be afraid of. And then, yeah, I think just like as you continue to progress, because then we get to the dark lantern, and we learn like, oh, all is not what it seems. Like that's when we start really getting the messaging of like, hey, maybe the people we thought we could trust, we can't actually trust. Maybe the things that we thought we understood, we don't actually understand, and the world is starting to flip itself on its head.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think like as you continue progressing, it's like a slow burn to you understanding just how dark this place is, and getting more and more ridiculous, right? Of like, oh, we're not in a place, because like when you start off and they're just like walking through the woods, you could believe that they're just physically lost, right?
Yeah.
And like until, I mean, yeah, they see the talking bluebird, and so you're like, okay, that's not something that totally just exists in our world. But like,
and then the skeletons.
And then the skeletons, right? And like we continue getting more and more ridiculous as things go on, until we get to like, again, huge monsters and specters of death like Lorna. And then we're directly facing the concept of death with like the ghosts, and like going to the mansion and like talking about these ghostly interactions, and like these themes of death are like running throughout the entire narrative. Yeah. Anything else to add?
I think the beast is personified throughout the series as the wind, and that's all I got.
That makes a lot of sense, and I agree with that.
One other fun fact, I think it's really fitting that we're doing Over the Garden Wall this year, because it's also the 10-year anniversary of Over the Garden Wall.
Fun.
And Patrick Mahale and Cartoon Network actually released, there's going to be an anniversary gift, a 2-minute stop-motion animated short about Over Garden the Wall, collaborating with Aardman. And that's the animation studio responsible for Wallace and Gromit, Chicken Run, Shaun the Sheep.
Ooh, hell
so that
yeah.
comes out November 3rd, 2024 for a 10-year anniversary for Over the Garden Wall.
So like 3 days after we're going to publish this. So listeners, definitely check that out.
Like an official Over the Garden Wall 10th anniversary tribute, 2-minute stop motion animated short.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah.